People of Earth, this is the dude speaking. You know we've traveled to many new worlds together, and there's many new worlds to continue exploring. This is what the podcast today is going to be about. So stay tuned. You never know what's going to happen in the realm of the dude. Dude out. People, we got a lot to go over today. The reason I say that every time is because we always do. This is actually going to be part 2 of Drew Struzan, my friend that just passed away recently right here. I've known Drew Struzan since early 2000, maybe even before, but I'll have to check on that based on my records. But the first time I saw him in the studio that he would be in at the time that he died, which is the one he's had for at least 30 years, I walked into his studio and he was working on one of the Three Stooges pieces. Again, this is something that was surreal to me. I didn't know what to make about a guy who could do art that was, let's just say I called him the greatest living illustrator for a reason. I mean, he was untouchable. He had a touch that is like a flaming meteor that never ran out of flame. And he continued to do it for 30 years, 30 plus years. And then the 2000s came along and changed all that. And that's when he and I were mostly in touch, because he was being courted by Lucasfilm to, of course, do the new Star Wars posters, and he would always have a story to tell me about how they were treating him, which was utmost on his mind, as it would anyone. I remember him telling me they had a board meeting at Disney. Was it Disney? Yeah, they own that stuff now. They were telling Stru, "We can't do this without you." And that's even in one of the books that he published, but it's a load of crap. They didn't care one bit about him. In fact, when the greatest living artist in movie poster history and illustration history would do artwork for these guys, he didn't even get a proper thank you from these people. Now, I mentioned him one time how differently I would have handled that. You know, his basic explanation of things was, I wanted the next job. He was very accommodating, and his wife Dylan was also the one that protected him from some of the morons out there that were trying to rip him off, and the various other things that art directors in art, people in art, the art business, tend to do to people. It was just a crazy ride for him. When I met Drew, I had heard before that he was a very egotistical guy. That is not the man that I knew. He was going through his phase of, oh, it's nothing, it's just stuff, it's just junk that I do, and it's no big deal. That's also in the book. You know, people like myself and others who would hear this refrain, what do you make of that? I mean, and then the worst of all, when I would ask him to critique my work, he would say, "You're doing fine, it's every bit as good as my work," and I would just cringe. For obvious reasons. I wanted to show you an example of the kind of Stru technique that I used to adapt to some of my paintings, seeing how I was such a influenced by his thing. But I don't think it looks anything like a Stru. It looks like a Rude, but I'll show you this in a second. And this is before I'm going to get into the other Stru original things that I took pictures of while I was at his studio, so I can go into more detail, which I think you're going to want to hear about. But this is a painting right here that I did that has kind of this, it's kind of my version of adapting a wash colored pencil kind of technique. And this one happened to turn out good, so that's why I'm showing it to you. The bad ones I'm going to keep to myself. I want to read a letter that Stru wrote me several years before his health started to really decline. Steve, carry on, my friend. Somebody has got to do it when I'm no longer here. Might as well be a tough guy who can carry the torch, hold it high, and light the world. Be good, Drew. So I wrote back, Drew, those sure are kind words you sent me, but I think you've clearly forgotten that the citation for the world's hardest worker can hardly go to me. Nobody could have endured the stresses and strains that you went through in the movie illustration loathsome agents industry for 40 years, and you still turned out work so brilliantly superior. There is simply no competing with your abilities, Drew. You are the greatest. I am honored to be in the very ground itself to know a man such as you, Drew. Your friend forever, Steve Rude. This was very common of the kind of replies I would give him, but normally I was always the one that wrote first, because I always had questions for him. I seem to be the question man here. Question answers have to come from someone else, apparently. Drew Struzan never turned out a bad job. And he was the most, just like Jack Kirby, he was the most mistreated artist that the industry ever saw, and the very greatest artist the industry ever saw. There seems to be a commonality there. But Drew, in all his greatness and his need to push on, no matter what they did to him or what they didn't do for him, he always gave it 100%. Now, if you think that's easy, guys, it is not. A lot of what propels artists on to do great work is knowing they're going to please the people they work for. Anyone who thinks that's a myth or a fallacy, you would be incorrect about that. If artists have it the way they want to, they're going to always want to have feedback on what they've done. So Stru would routinely turn in poster after poster after poster, meeting the insane deadlines of often up to either overnight, like the Thing poster, or the normal week that he had to turn out one of these 30 by 40 posters. Let me tell you, people, with a cast of thousands he usually put into all his posters, okay, you can ask me this and I'll give you the answer. How easy do you think it was to do a poster like that in a week? Let me think. Okay, it was awful. I would love to do a movie poster for a commission of some kind, and I would charge a rather large amount for it, at least 20 grand, I would think. And I would do it on the same illustration board that all the movie poster artists worked on, for the one sheet, as they call it, and give it my absolute best shot. It would be a joy to receive something from somebody of a movie or some classic movie that I had an affinity for, that I would like to do my own version of. That would just be a blast. There were people that contacted me a couple years back about that, but I don't think they could afford it, so that never took place. Since this is Stru Part 2, we're going to go over some of the stuff that we saw last week, but I'm going to give you more in-depth things that I learned about it and comments on the actual execution of the brilliance of the artwork. Let's get Ladyhawke poster up. What's hard to believe with a guy like Stru who's so advanced. If I had to rate more mortal abilities among artists, this guy would be transcendently immortal. If you look at this poster from this distance, you can't even tell how it's done. But given that he's got this colored pencil thing going on, and the way he uses it is almost invisible in a lot of ways, and yet it's just enough on there to give it that strength of the design, that you can carve out forms when you come in with the lighter colored pencils over the darker tones, which is what I did here. Now we're going to go to a close-up of Michelle Pfeiffer's head. Now look at the texture in her face. You can see it very clearly because these were shot off Stru's originals, which he let me take pictures of right here. There's like a very strange, like a texture going on here, almost as if he took the gesso that he laid down and airbrushed and color penciled over some kind of a very, like a wall texture of some kind, where you kind of go over it with a kind of a certain kind of roller, and you get these tiny little bumps. Tiny, I mean really tiny here. This isn't like orange peeling the side of a wall with paint. This is very subtle stuff. And that's what the actual original looked like. I hope you can see it on that version there. On top of that, let me tell you what you have to be a guy like this. You have to be, well, you have to be superhuman, okay? That's number one. If you're not part of the superhero guild, you're gonna have to wait and pay high memberships to ever get in there. You have to have perfect draftsmanship. Never mind that you have to resort to, which he didn't have to at all, resort to taking it on a Blopticon and blowing it up the image from the actual photo and tracing from the photo onto the illustration board. People, let me tell you how deceptive that is. That is a lot harder than you think it is. In fact, Stru was on the phone with me one day. I was bringing that up to him, like how hard that is to pull off perfection, in spite of the fact that he would use a method like this of transfer. Hello, Sam. And he would say, yeah, I had a friend call me up the other day, and he goes, you know, I tried that method that you're doing here, blowing it up and tracing it. It didn't turn out anything like the one that you do. Why is that? If you've ever tried it, guys, if you've ever tried to do a Stru technique thing here, then you'll see the difference between a genius and mere pikers. Okay, so that one right there, that was taken in the storage area. About a mile from his house, he just rented a storage space to alphabetize and very cleanly organize all his paintings in terms of A through B through C through Z. When I went in there, some people talk about going to heaven or having a permanent stay at Disneyland or being with 72 virgins. I go for being in his area, little area right here where he stores his paintings. Because when I was able to take these things out, it was one freak out after another. We have to take a hike, go chase the dick. One after another just came pouring out, and I just, his comment to me, someone looking at how I reacted, he go, "Well, they are for sale." I said, "Yes, I know they're for sale." In fact, recently on Heritage, there was a Stru poster, one of his absolute best from the 80s. It was the Return to Oz poster with little Dorothy and all the characters, animals and stuff. And it was just like the last word on what you could have done to render that image on a board as artwork. I wrote in and said, "What's the guy selling it for?" I was curious, because I know the guys at Heritage, they sell my own art there. I said, "Well, I could probably afford 10 grand at the most, and I'd have to take out a loan for that." So the guy at Heritage writes back and said, "The guy bought this in 2000 or 1900 or whatever, and he bought it for $65,000. Or was it $165,000? I get math mixed up sometime. So I quietly just kind of thanked him and hung up the phone. This is the mystery girl that everyone apparently put such a fuss about, asking Stru who she is and how I can meet her. And this is one of the last posters he had in the storage area. If you look way to the right there, it was propped up against a space that had a very large storage area. And the reason it was large is because this poster is 5 feet tall. Or is it 6? I don't know. It's huge. It is not on some 30 by 40 piece of paper. It's freaking up to here. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And so I just blew my mind to see that he went through all the trouble of blowing this freaking girl up to a height of 6 feet. Okay, so what we have here is the great Stru next to the humble dude right here. On the left is that girl's face from one of the Police Academy posters. And on the right is my very inspired version of a Stru technique painting with Sherry Jackson, as if you didn't guess. That's only part of the painting. It's a full half figure of her from one of her still shots from Star Trek. And let's just say I had a really good time working on that. So that's a comparison of Stru and the dude right there. His, of course, are light years beyond me. The next poster I want to go into is the second Harry Potter poster, because I have a story to tell you about that. This poster, let me tell you the story about this poster. He did the first Harry Potter poster. Everything went fine. In the middle of him executing the second poster, the dumbasses in the studio, true to form, called him up and said, "Stop working on the poster because we're going to go to photography." Does that come with a razor blade to tell somebody something like that? Or a carving knife? So what I saw in his studio was the finished version. I said, "Drew, did you actually finish it on your own without ever getting paid for it?" He says, "Yeah." So I hate high-fiving, but I actually gave Drew a 5 there. It was very memorable. And that was a case where I brought a friend over to see Stru that evening, probably just crashing in out of nowhere. And I remember having a chance to study the poster, but honestly, you need an entire day, make it a week, to really look at his originals and really get to the point where you're finally starting to comprehend the abilities, the transcendent abilities that go into work like this. Stru did the work. Artists don't think of themselves the way other people think of us. Me being the humble dude, of course, that's the trademark name. So it'll be on my tombstone. But Stru, he thought kind of the same of his own work, which is obviously incomprehensible to us mortals. But that's the way we think about it. We're just people that love what we do, and we love trying hard. When there's another thing coming up that we know we have to impress somebody, you give it everything you've got. And that's a lot of preliminary work. And we forget about that when it comes to movie posters, because you've got to gather all the reference of the characters. And some of it they send it through was terrible, fuzzy, out of focus reference. And then you'd have to organize all the figures in a painting with a beautiful composition. And if he didn't have the actor in the pose that he wanted, he'd have to get the clothes that the people were wearing in the movie, pose somebody that he knew, which was often. This is what we all do as illustrators here. And then work from that reference of the body and then put the heads on of the characters that are in the movie. Not easy, let me tell you. So that's the story of the second Harry Potter poster right here. Hang on, I'm just getting started here. Let's go to American Justice. He knew that one very well. This one right here. This is one that I had a great fondness for. And when I pulled it out of the storage boxes, he goes, "Oh, American Justice." It's funny because the reason he knew that so fast is because it was one of his earlier works. And the farther back in time you go, you tend to remember things when things were raw, new, and still fun. So he just rattled that name off right away. It's one of his best, absolute best. And you can see from the two insert shots that I put up there, a lot of the technique that he used with his acrylic airbrush colored pencil methodology to make it work. But if you go to this one right here, this is one I really want to point out. This area was done in a miraculous way. This goes to show his incredible command of using different methods of accomplishing something that looks like it's in great detail, but isn't. This is actually kind of the equivalent of a pointillism or a line pointillism kind of a thing on fine art paintings. The picture of guy from 9 to 5, you can see that if you look carefully at the rendering in the orange area, you can see that it was done with a lot of little strokes, but not with infinite detail like he did on the faces and the other parts of the painting here. It's done very sporadically, but expertly. You'd never know that it's made up of all those wide strokes of different colors. But it's not refined. It's not rendered to death. It's just him using his remarkable facility with Prismacolors in making it work. Blow hard, get out of here. Take a hike. We are going to pause for effect here and actually go and remove the whippets from the premises here. Are we? Whippet. Put Whippet in a room and she can cry all she wants, all right? Okay, so that's what you're looking at, what I'm going through right there. Whippet biting her fur, and Little Dick is her best friend that she tortures all the time. Yeah. You're not getting sympathy from me. You know what? We'll save these for the next time. There's so much going on here that I don't want to burn you guys out from the genius of Stru. But we're gonna the rest of them that are up here that we showed some of them last week. We're gonna go into them because I want to talk about what I learned about them when I saw the originals and what Stru told me at the time that we were looking at them together. Work hard, okay? Study. Get your sketchbook out. Learn the things you don't want to learn. And then you'll be set for life. And do that for the next 40 years. I'll see you next week. Take care.